So welcome back. This is Being Your Best Self. And today we've got Ruth joining us with Andy and myself. And we're going to be talking about dressing authentically. Because actually, Superman dressed authentically when he was a superhero. But we want to talk about what that means for us. And especially when we go to different environments, maybe when we're stepping in and out of that phone box or wherever it might be.
A digital phone box, I think, these days.
You were Doctor Who.
Absolutely. Or Mr. Ben, maybe.
We'll get some Mr. Ben references in there, definitely. Definitely.
Let's go shoot then, Ruth. You're the guest. You've been brought here specifically for this topic. Unleash.
Wow. I mean, dressing authentically, we should talk about authenticity, really, and what it means. Yeah. I do think it's an overplayed word. Yeah. And for me, when I hear it bandied around, it can sound like quite a lot of pressure. Like, you should be authentic. Like, you need to be more authentic. And if you're thinking, oh, well, how do I do that? Then that's a tension. That's not helping you. So I think it can be a barrier to, ironically, being authentic, which I think is much more about finding out a little bit more about who you are and then living to that purpose. So thinking about where you want to go, what you want to give back, and then meeting that a little bit as often as you can. And I think authenticity in a word is a byproduct as opposed to something that you would put as like an input into it.
So what does that mean for you, Ruth?
So for me, it means, great coaching question, Annie.
Sorry.
You get all these coaches together. For me, it means hacking into who you are and why you're here. And I can often be found at parties having deep conversations in the corner about why do you think you're on the planet? It sounds annoying or great, depending on your personality. But I think this is, if we can find out a little bit more about who we are and why we're here, then we can step into that. So practically, it might be that you're someone that helps people feel good about themselves, that you help other people feel good, or you like to connect with them and understand more about them, or you like to help them feel more confident, or it could be anything about that is your kind of deep down kind of purpose. And then knowing that that's okay and that's like enough, and you can translate that into your life. That's what I think really authenticity is.
That really struck me there when you talked about enough, that's enough. Because I think there's so much gilding the lily and overcooking the pasta, so to speak, in terms of when we're trying to be authentic.
It's intimidating.
It is because you're exposing yourself, right? It's this is me, and hopefully you're going to like me for what I am. I think that quite a lot of it's good, but some of it's not necessarily brilliant. But I'm working on that sort of thing.
That's authentic, isn't it? It's like, I understand a bit about myself, but I'm still working on myself. And there's the other word that annoys me quite a bit, even though I think it's useful, is vulnerability. Because I think if you say to someone, be vulnerable, they're like,
what do you want me to do?
I don't know how. Like, this is like, what's your point? So it's it's people open up at their own step, right? And it's
I've heard something really wise about that in terms of what we expect from other people when we get to know them is for them to be vulnerable to us, but we don't want to be vulnerable to them generally. But if everyone's doing the same thing, there's a bit of an impasse.
Right.
That's going to be an awkward situation, really, isn't it?
And vulnerability is this word that, like, it's like vulnerable sounds like weakness, and we know, like, because we talk about this stuff a lot, that it's more of a strength. But I think even the word, and I'm going to make some blanket statements, which you can tell me I'm wrong, but particularly for men, is not necessarily cool unless you've been on that journey a bit. So
I would agree. I think I think we like to think of ourselves as a finished product when we're not. You're the whole way through your life, it's a work in progress, right? And you're learning every day. There might be a day that you go out and think, I absolutely knocked that out of the park today, that was fantastic. And that's great. We all need to have those sorts of days, but equally there's got to be things where you can sit back and say, actually, I could have done that a little bit better, or if I'd have done this slightly differently, perhaps that outcome would have been better. And I think that ability to be reflective and not get so engulfed in the work that you've done, whether there's a positive or a negative to that, because it's easy to get into both of those kind of hoppers and just want to spend a lot of time there. But to kind of have the ability to step out of it a little bit and say, right, that was really good, and that maybe wasn't quite so good. What would I do if I had that opportunity again? What are the things I would do more of? What are the things I would have done less of? And that's that kind of, for me anyway, that's that evolution piece that you're doing, and the constant kind of desire to be your best self means you've got to be learning all the time, because the second you stop, you're going backwards.
But learning's all about taking stock, isn't it, and reflecting and sticking your hand up when it's all gone a bit Pete Tong, so to speak, if you get the reference.
Yeah, definitely. And it does. That's the other thing, I suppose. This element, vulnerable as a word, I agree with Ruth. It's just such a difficult one for people to connect with. But equally, that thing to say, do you know what? Hand up. This isn't.
What I think's better than vulnerable? Demasking. I should know it's a rubbish term in terms of the word, but what it means in terms of like actually vulnerable is actually about taking the mask off and saying, well, this is actually who I am.
Yeah.
Deal with it in a nice way.
Yeah. I actually did a podcast recording with Andy Woodfield, who's a partner at PwC, and I entitled his interview, "Drop Your Guard and Show Us Who You Really Are."
Nice.
Because I think that's what was his message, because he'd be like, all of this, drop it. I don't care. I don't care about who you think you should be, or I really want to know you. And it came with love, but it was also very direct. It was like breaking them down to build them back up again. But it seemed like great leadership because it came from a great place.
It was a great podcast as well. I've listened to that one.
Yeah, me too. Thank you, Ruth. So any last thoughts, Ruth, as we just sort of draw to a close here?
Well, I guess you mentioned about dressing authentically. So for me, I'm wearing mustard right now. This is a color that makes me feel happy and more myself and more playful.
Yeah.
And I think that naturally I'm quite playful, but I got quite serious for a while, like especially in my 20s and early 30s. Like I got like stressed, anxious, and mustard then became this color I discovered. And I'm like, Ruth, you're actually like just mucking about, it doesn't mean you can't work hard and be silly. And so I feel much more at home in that, and it feels like a bit of a discovery to know that I'm more home being playful. So that feels real.
Find your place to play.
Yeah.
Go for it.
If anyone wants to play,
absolutely. And we want to hear about that. Where's your place to play? Thank you so much, Ruth. It's been wonderful having you on with us. And thank you, Andy. Cheers.
Cheers.